Welcome to the Book Binge. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and a little while ago, a couple months ago at this point, I did a little bit of a buddy read with several of my friends. The most notable thing about the book in question being that of all 10 plus of my friends who have read it, every single one of them has given it 5 out of 5. That is The Carpet Makers by Andreas Eschbach. I probably pronounced that terribly. I'm sorry if I did. But this is a very interesting book because of the fact that every one of my Goodreads friends and also my personal friends in general, I'm pretty sure every one of them has given it a 5 out of 5. That is a very, very high average rating, of course, for any book, especially for such a relatively small sample size. Even if it is a bunch of friends, we all have our different tastes and interests. So the fact that it does click for everybody that I know personally in this regard is really, really interesting. However, after reading the book, it's really easy to see why this book is great, not to bury the lead in this video, but I also have the slight complication here in that I think I might be the first person in my friend group to not give this 5 out of 5 because I'm more inclined to give it 4 out of 5. Now that might be more because it's a 4.5 that I'm choosing to round down instead of up. But let's talk about this book and, perhaps some of the reasons why it is so beloved, at least within my friend group. We shall start off, just like normal, with the good of the book, and I think that the primary good of The Carpet Makers comes down to the fact that it is so intentional with its construction, and really just to even comprehend constructing a book the way that this is, and it managing to fit together so perfectly throughout, basically the entire thing is really, really, really difficult. It is simultaneously a collection of short stories and also a novel. This isn't necessarily a super unique thing. There are plenty of other fix-up novels that are basically just collections of short stories that were later turned into a novel, that were given connections between each other to make it into a broader narrative. There are some other novels that are constructed in a very similar way, that they are basically short stories, but they form a bigger picture. But I'm not sure how many of those books, how many of those novels are handled in the way that this is, because many of those kinds of books, at least as far as I'm aware, I haven't read very many of them, if any, besides this one. I'm not even entirely sure. But I feel like, in general, a lot of these fix-up kind of novels are either going across generations in a sense that the timeline is very large, and that's why it's a collection of shorter vignettes that tell a bigger, longer story in that sense. Some of them are just short story collections in the sense that they still revolve around the same characters or the same kinds of themes or something like that, that form a bigger picture after you've read multiple of them or something like that. There's different ways to compose something like this, but just the particular way that The Carpet Makers handles that kind of idea is very, very different. It's very good. It's one of those where you have a very, zoomed in view of a very particular thing as that first story, and each one after that kind of zooms out, basically. It's like you're looking at something through I guess you could say a microscope, say if you're looking at a universe type of view and you're just zoomed in on Earth, on a particular person, and then you zoom out gradually with every one of those stories, just taking the scope of that even bigger and going into an even just bigger idea space, basically. Now, this book doesn't take place on Earth or anything like that. This is a sci-fi book, but that's just the kind of idea of what you're doing with it. This is a fix-up novel in the sense that every story is just zooming out a little bit more, basically, for nearly the entire thing. And the way that it does that and the way that this is compelling and works is because of the next really good point of The Carpet Makers, and that is the mystery of it. It's not a mystery in the sense of a detective mystery or anything even remotely like that, but there is definitely a central question that permeates the entire book. From the very first story, you have a very intimate look at a cultural ideas, basically, of certain things that are going on, especially with regards to the title, The Carpet Makers, and the more literal title of it, mind you, because this is a book translated from German. The German title, more literally translated, should be The Hair Carpet Makers rather than just The Carpet Makers, or maybe The Hair Carpet Weavers or something like that. The point is, it's not just carpets, it's hair, and that very minute, intimate cultural idea is introduced to you in the first story, the first chapter. But like I said, that zooms out even more. And the mystery of the hair carpets is the central conceit. That is the central question. You're trying to figure out what the hell is the deal with the carpets, and that is the thing that goes through the entire book. That is the mystery of the entire book. As you zoom out, you get a bigger and better picture, but the mystery is very slowly unraveled until you feel like you have an idea, but you're never going to actually guess what the actual reveal is. The actual reveal at the end is how shall we say, unexpected. As far as I know, none of my friends who guessed that the reveal got it right. I definitely didn't get it right. It's one of those things where it's like it's so funny in hindsight. But while you're reading, like, you could basically never guess that the actual answer to the mystery there is the answer that it is. It's just so goofy in that way. But basically the point that I'm trying to make is that there is that core mystery, and the exploration and the expansion of that within this sort of fix-up novel kind of sense is just definitely really great experience. It's a really enjoyable experience. It's a really compelling experience as well. Just there was never a time where I wanted to stop reading this book. Basically, it is compulsively readable. There are plenty of books where it's just like, oh man, I couldn't put it down. It was hard to not just turn the page and read the next chapter. That was definitely true of this book. It took me longer to read than it should have, because there were other things going on in my life. But as far as whenever I would had a morning where I could start reading it, the fact that I had to stop reading it at some point to go, like, do my actual job, for example, was always despair worthy. It's just very, very compulsively readable. Maybe a little slight bit of evidence to this fact is that I have a particular friend, DJ, if you're watching, hello, who has not done a ton of reading this year. He's actually done, I think, maybe more reading this year than last year, but over the last couple years, he's struggled to be able to make time for reading, and he actually started reading The Carpet Makers like 2 weeks before the rest of us, because he figured that the rest of us would still manage to finish the book before him because of how slow he's been getting through anything, just in terms of what he's got going on in his life with family and whatnot. He finished the book a week before the rest of us started. So like he managed to just lock in. It was compulsively readable, like I've used that term a few times already, just get through it. So that should speak the praises to this book. It's so compelling. It's very difficult to put down, right? So, there's frankly not really that much else to say for the good, weirdly enough, with this book, besides what I've said. The structure, the pacing of it, the slow zoom out of stuff, the pacing of that is really on point. The gradual continuity and connections between all those stories that help you piece things together, but not exact answers, right? Like, all of that makes up the vast bulk of this experience, and it's not a long book. It's less than 300 pages, so it's not that long either. That's another great thing about it. But as such, those points that I've already talked about here make up the vast bulk of why it is so good. There aren't a ton of random little things to get into that I should mention in this section, because it's really that. Like, if that sounds like something that's cool, and it is cool, again, all of my friends have given this 5 out of 5. It's something worth checking out. So with that, we'll go ahead and switch over to the bad of The Carpet Makers, because there are a couple things worth mentioning here that are basically counter to the points that I've made in the good. The main one of those being that if you're looking for a straightforward or traditional narrative, this is definitely not that. So if that's the kind of sci-fi book you want to read, The Carpet Makers is maybe best to wait until you want something that's more of a fix-up novel, something that's starts small and gets big with a different POV every chapter, basically. It's not necessarily that this is a bad thing. It's just something that you should be aware of before you get into it, because if you start reading the book and every chapter switches the POV and the scope of it, you might be thrown off if you're not expecting that. I knew that was kind of what it was going to be doing ahead of time, or at least I was vaguely aware of that factor, so it didn't impact me in that way, but I do think that it is something that is worth knowing for you to read, obviously. You're not following the same characters or even really a proper plot most of the time in a normal way. You're just seeing these vignettes as that slowly expands and gives you a bigger view of the universe. And that might not be for everybody, and it might not be for you right now, but it might be for you in like 3 months from now or something like that, right? So, that unexpected, more literary fashion of the construction is incredible, just maybe not right for the moment, depending on your proclivities. For me, the one thing that did quote unquote bother me personally, the reason why this is looking more like a 4 out of 5 for me than the 5 out of 5 for everybody else, is that the way that POVs jumped in the last act kind of caught me off guard in a way that I'm still not 100% sure how I feel. Every chapter does one of these POV changes, but the connection between those characters or between what's happening in the stories is usually quite explicit. And even where it's not, it might take a few pages before that connection is made. But it is pretty easy to see where the connection is the vast majority of the time. There's like 1 to 2 chapters late in the book, like within the last handful of chapters, basically, where that isn't immediately the case. And it did admittedly throw me off quite a bit. Like I was on a roll with following along where things were going. And then there were like 2 sections that were like, what in the hell did I even just read? I have no idea what that even was, that I felt like I had to reread those sections and I still didn't really get it. It's because those couple of sections ultimately come around in the end. They become relevant after the last couple of chapters that follow them. But it was something that definitely threw me off enough and threw off, my consistency with reading it enough within that particular section of the book that it very slightly impacted my personal enjoyment of it. Like I said, it's like a 4.5 that I might choose to round down as of this recording. I still haven't even given it a proper rating on Goodreads because I just haven't decided whether I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 yet. So, to be clear, like I said, it does ultimately come around in the end, even for me. Even for me, I do like the reveal at the end. In hindsight, especially, it's quite funny. And for all of my friends personally, that reveal in the end has come around. But between those couple of chapters kind of throwing me off personally, and also the fact that, the reveal to that mystery very well might not work for some people. Like some people might look at that, think that the entire book was stupid and not worth reading because of it. That is a potential, that's kind of what you get for something being basically a mystery, So it's not really a case of there being a bad ending or those couple of chapters being bad per se, just that those couple of chapters threw me off personally, and then the reveal might not work for everybody. So that's basically what I have to say for the bad. Which means, of course, that it is time for the ugly. And, well, I've seen some bad reviews for this on Goodreads. And I'm going to not call out any of these specifically, but just kind of a general theme of some of the 1-star reviews that I guess I'll utilize that theme to call out for the ugly here. There are plenty of the less enthused reviewers of the Carpet Makers that complain about quote-unquote misogyny in this book for reasons that to me seem very strange personally. Things like the simple lack of female characters or female narrators throughout the book. I think there's one POV that's a woman, and for some reason this bothers some people enough to give it 1 star, I guess. And then there's also the role of women within the culture, the primary culture involved with the mystery, that some people are bothered by, that some people take a little bit of offense to, not because I don't think it's because they're dehumanized at all. It just that some people take it that way, I guess. It's hard to really cover that topic. And also, my friend group can be a very good example of how this isn't necessarily going to affect everybody. There's a huge swath of different types of people and personal opinions and proclivities, political opinions and proclivities, religious ideals within my friend group. We have a very diverse set of people, even within just 24 people. There's a very large subset of different ideas and beliefs, but out of the, dozen of those people that have read this book and all given it 5 out of 5, that, and, at I think a half dozen of those, somewhere around a half dozen of those being women, it should be pretty clear that this isn't going to be a problem where if you're a feminist, don't read this book because it's going to offend you or anything like that. It's just a case that many of the 1-star reviews carry forward this theme of being bothered by this aspect, I guess. Frankly, if you're the type of person to read into things, subjects like misogyny, or, find misogyny in everything, even when it's just normal stuff, maybe don't read this book, I guess, question mark. Otherwise, if you're, I mean, I guess to put it a little bit more bluntly, if you're a normal person who's not looking to be offended by things, this book is really, really, really great. So, you know, a huge variety of my tastes, like I said, tastes amongst my friends all really love this book. It's not that deep, so that's the only thing that I could really come up with for the ugly of this review. So we're going to move on into the recommendation now, and to put it quite simply, there is a reason why everybody that I know loves this book, and there's a reason why I also really enjoyed this book. I definitely loved and adored the first 2/3 of it. The last third of it, you know, like I said, threw me off just a little bit, but I'm the exception amongst my friends for being thrown off a little bit. Everybody else loves it, right? So that is not to say that every potential reader of this book will love it. Of course, you know, not everything's going to work for everybody, but if there's anything about this book that sounds intriguing to you, I recommend giving it a shot. Just give the book a little bit of patience to do what it's doing, and maybe you'll find a new favorite. This is definitely a favorite of multiple of my friends because of how well it works. You know, it's not a new personal favorite of mine, but definitely one of the more memorable reads that I've done, not least because I don't read a ton of sci-fi, and for this to be one of those sci-fi books, pretty solid. So that is going to be the end of this review, basically. You know, somewhat like my review of Perfume that I did relatively recently. I actually forgot that I didn't review this one a little bit more immediately after I read it, but now that it's been caught up to, and in much quicker time at that, I hope you enjoyed the video. All that being said, I don't even remember off the top of my head what the next video is going to be, but for now, in either case, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I do hope to see you guys in the next video, whatever that might be.